Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Nick Halaris Show. Our guest this week is my good friend, Ibert Schultz, who's the executive director of a really innovative nonprofit, Black College Success. Ibert, welcome to the show.
So great to be with you today, Nick. Looking forward to today's conversation.
Yeah, me too. I mean, this is basically a recorded version of a conversation that you and I have been having for several years now. So it should be an easy one.
Yeah, I have no doubt about it.
So there's a lot of different places we could start this, but if you're cool with it, I thought we could talk about something that you and I actually never talked about, but I heard you speak about on a podcast recently as I was sort of preparing myself for this one, which is you mentioned in, I think the show was called The Ringer. You were talking about Black College Success and your mission there, but you mentioned sort of offhand that growing up in New York City in the sort of Giuliani era set the stage for kind of a lot of your thinking and later in life as you thought about your career. So tell me what that was like and how that sort of informs your thinking these days.
Well, first off, thanks, Nick, for having me. Long-time listener. I'm happy to be here with you today. I think this is a really good question. New York City back in the day is just an entirely different place, I like to say. You know, it's a place that when we think about the artist, we think about like kind of a dynamic city, like really trying to figure itself out. It's entirely the opposite of what it is right now. I personally tend to think that the city's fantastic right now, in a great place. Struggling with issues of affordability and everything that comes with like hyper development. But growing up in New York was just an interesting time because I think you had a city struggling to define itself in so many ways and reflect this different communities that were trying to come together. Giuliani era, I think the best way to describe it is hostility toward minority communities. And I think that's how he kind of made his bones in terms of law and order. But when you talk about law and order, who's it against and who's it for? I happen to find myself, taking the trains to school, going from Brooklyn to Harlem, which is probably about maybe like 5 miles away from each other, but it's a world away. You ride in the train for about 45 minutes and you're going through maybe about like 15 different communities and neighborhoods. That's good. That's fun. You get to see so much of the city. But the downside is you also have to, how do you say, deal with the police, who didn't necessarily understand your story and kind of cast a wide net over who was a threat or kind of, who was, didn't belong in certain places. So that definitely informed kind of like my view of the world. You grow up, you kind of are wary of like kind of authorities. You kind of understand that, if I had more people in a situation who were from my situation, who look like me, who, from the community, maybe I'm not getting stopped and frisked as much, right? Maybe I'm not thrown up against restaurant windows with my buddies while people are dining to frisk us and make sure that we weren't quote unquote to any good. So, just a different type of different experience, but in total really informed me in so many ways. Most important was the use of public facilities. The one thing I love about New York is no matter how well you're doing, I'd like to say, everybody's living in an apartment. Now, Jamie Dimon might have an apartment with like 3 floors, 3 terraces, a doorman, and 15 bedrooms. But ultimately, it's still an apartment, right? And what that means is there's a sense of appreciation for our parks and our common spaces. So I remember going to the pool a lot. I remember playing basketball outside a lot. I remember doing all these things that was in the community, and it was provided for by the city, by the state, and it was maintained. And those things like kind of really impacted me. I knew that, what's the purpose of government? It's collective action, the chance to kind of, for us to all to be together. So, when I say coming up in New York during the Giuliani era, it's twofold for me. It's one, understanding of, we need representation. We need folks from the community kind of doing the work. And then two, our public services matter so much. They matter in so many different ways, like those summer programs, those public facilities that are open so that, everybody can have a similar and important experience, a similar and enriched experience during the summer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. I grew up in sort of like the complete opposite type of environment.
Yeah.
I lived in this suburban neighborhood just north of Detroit. You know how you remember the movie 8 Mile?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I grew up on 16 Mile. Okay, so that's like, I was like 6 or 8 miles from the border of Detroit. So.
Yeah.
But it was a place where like, I didn't have the appreciation for common spaces.
Yeah.
Because it's just suburban stuff, you know, you just riding around the neighborhood. So that's kind of interesting. And then obviously it's a different environment than the Giuliani hostility to minorities, you know, as a white kid growing up in the Detroit area. On the front of the hostility part, like how frequent of an experience was that for you?
You know, it's interesting because I don't know if it's something I just never thought about until like, you know, kind of, you know, became left adolescence and became an adult and really kind of had different experiences. Because when you're in it, you just think this is the world, right? It isn't until you kind of go away to school and you kind of meet other people or you kind of see other places in the world, you're like, hey, actually, this is not how it works. And this is not how it should work. So, you know, I would probably say, I couldn't put an exact number, but I just know it was in an environment. You know, and for good measure, these are tough questions to deal with. And I'm not naive to the challenges that the city was experiencing. I remember that feeling that you get in the bottom of your stomach when you're like, when it's late at night and you're coming home with your buddies and you see, and you know what danger feels like, you know, and in those situations, what do? You do want, you know, some type of support, but I think about danger shouldn't come from all avenues, right? It shouldn't come from the people who's supposed to protect and serve. But I think the city's changed immensely, and I think things are a lot better because I just think, I don't know if it's more prosperity. I don't know if it's just more representation. I just know, like, you know better, you do better. Is on a continuum of progress and development. I mean, I don't know. So, you know, I would probably say, I couldn't tell you exactly, but I would say that, you know, it was frequent. It was just kind of a fact of life.
It was just something that you and your friends dealt with, like, regularly.
Yeah, it was just kind of like a, you know, you just kind of knew.
Yeah.
You know, and it's a shame, right?
Yeah, it's terrible. Yeah. And it's gotten better, but it's still around. Obviously, George Floyd and these things are still happening, like, with frequency. Yeah. So the racially motivated police action is still a problem, but it sounds like it was more of a problem maybe back then. Yeah,
I know. And I don't know if there's, you know, I don't know if there's a solution, but I think there is, as long as there's a commitment for communities to come together for a sense of dialogue or a sense of common bond toward a common solution, you know, it'll be better. And, you know, that dialogue has to continue to happen, and, you know, these practices have to evolve, you know, because, I just, as you say this, I'm thinking back around how it used to be back in the days.
Yeah.
And, you know, I wouldn't want that for my son or the young people I work with either.
Yeah, definitely not. Yeah, I haven't had a lot of run-ins with police ever in my life, but several times in the last few years, I guess it was more in the COVID era, so it was a couple years ago, I made calls into the police because I was like dealing with homeless people who were fighting or something. Yeah. And what was interesting about those experiences is that's the first question that the dispatch people are asking me. Yeah. They want to know the race of the person who's involved in it. And I'm like, I get it, like it's a piece of identifying information, but to the point where like they've asked it more than once. Like I didn't answer it fast enough. Yeah. And I was like, okay, all right. So it's still obviously very much top of mind for people within law enforcement.
No, for sure. And like I said, it's a very difficult job. And it's like kind of like, you know, quick decision making. And, you know, you just hope folks, you know, you want folks to make the best decision with the amount of information that they have. But I just hope we continue to progress is my one hope with all this stuff. And I think it's generally the case. Yeah. Like, I'm optimistic.
Me too. I am too. I feel like, you know, like what's happening with our kids' generation. Yeah. I feel like there's a way to break this. Yeah. It's literally, you could do it in one generation. Yeah. But everyone would have to sort of have the advantages that our kids have.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because what I've noticed with my own children, they happen to go to this phenomenal progressive school. Yeah. Together with your kids. But they understand that people look different. Yeah. But the idea of the fact that someone looks different implies that they have different character traits. Yeah. That has never once crossed their mind. Yeah. Where when I grew up, sort of, it was all over the television, right? You turn on the TV and every story was about, a black criminal, basically.
Yeah,
That was like the
yeah,
nightly news in the Detroit area, which I'm sure it was the same thing in New
yeah,
York.
yeah.
But our kids haven't seen that, so they don't have any of that baggage.
I
And it's
know.
just like, okay, that's just what that person looks like.
Yeah, no, I know, and I think that's also a blessing. That's a tremendous blessing, right? Because it allows them to kind of like see people for what they are, and kind of learn new cultures under the auspices of excitement, of curiosity, and engagement.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited for kind of what's to come for the young people.
Yeah, and it can get better, and it will,
Yeah.
because I do feel like the tide is turned. I mean, there's still obviously major racism problems in the
Yeah.
world, and even here in a progressive city like Los Angeles, but
Yeah.
it can turn, and it can turn fast. Just to close the loop on Giuliani. So for me, the first time I ever heard of Giuliani was 9/11, and he had this sort of heroic moment. Fast forward to like that Borat movie. Like that dude, he obviously, first of all, how did he not get arrested after that movie? Like that, whatever was going down there.
Yeah, I think sometimes good things happen to bad people.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean by that is just
Definitely.
that, I think time has revealed like kind of like, his character. And, like I said, he did some good things, but, I just remember my experience in the shadow of the city. And it's really intriguing to see, where he's landed. It's almost as if, I don't know if it's Shakespearean or even Grecian in terms of the story arc.
Yeah.
Hero to villain to outcast.
Total outcast.
Yeah.
Like the dude's gonna die broke and maybe in jail.
Yeah,
Who knows?
literally.
Crazy. Such is life.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for being willing to kind of go back in time and because I do think it obviously informed your character and informed your passion for public service, which I want to talk about later. But let's talk right now about Black College Success.
Yeah. Black College Success is, I think I found it to be the challenge of my life. It's an opportunity to, have what I didn't have, and stand in the gap for young people just like me who are coming up. And what I mean by that is, I'm fortunate where I just had great people in my life throughout each stage of the journey, and not everyone has that. So, I went to public school, went to a public school, went to a few, but always just wound up in like kind of a great class, gifted and talented programs. And then I went away to college. And I went away to college, literally, it's going to sound nonsensical now, but based on a TV show. A Different World was on television. And I remember saying to cousin of mine, I was like, hey, where you want to go to school? I was like, oh, I want to go to Hillman College, which is the college on a different world. And he goes, you do realize that doesn't exist. It's a show on television. It's a college that's on television. But I was like, so what's the what will be the approximate of a different world? And he was like, Morehouse College. That's where I went. I was like, well, that's where I'm going. And I found myself at Morehouse College, and there, I call it just one of the greatest places the greatest decision I've ever made. I found like a whole community of folks who just look like me, right? You talk about identity, you talk about brotherhood, you talk about a sense of community. I went to a place where some of my best friends to this day are my classmates. And not only are they my best friends, my classmates, but I see frequently in like, when I'm doing business or when I'm like kind of in like on a professional matter, people we're literally in class with. I'm on the other side of the table, and we're reconnecting like kind of in that moment. So it's like see the full spectrum of the American experience, really concentrated. So doing that allowed me to kind of dream bigger for myself and dream bigger for in terms of goals. One thing I did wanted to do is, while I am a big person of service, I do think you just can't devote your life to service. I do think you got to kind of learn how the private sector works. You got to learn, because I think the two work in concert, the two work in tandem when it's at its best. So I did know that I wanted to be a professional who did serious work, and that's why I went to law school, and that's why I really kind of wanted to kind of push myself and challenge myself to exist in the corporate space. So that's why I went to law school, and there's always a choice you make in law school. And this choice is, I don't know why it's so black and white. You have the public service crew, and you have the corporate folks. And for some odd reason, you can only go on one track or whatever. And that's not really the case, but in your mind. And I remember doing a lot of government classes and like public service style classes, but also being like, I kind of got to understand like kind of the private side of it. So I took a lot of tax classes. My one regret is that I didn't go all in on like corporate securities and kind of things like that to kind of understand how the markets work at a micro level, like kind of issuing stock, etc. And I had to learn a lot. I had to learn a lot of that on the fly when I went to my firm. You learn how to not just be a lawyer, but to be a grade A professional. Job isn't done till the job is done, which is great. And I am thankful to my now wife for being really considerate and thoughtful and supportive, because if you go and work at Monday, there's a chance you might not come home until Wednesday. But you're young and you're learning and you're absolutely like kind of in the thick of it. But I did know that I wasn't gonna do that for the rest of my life. It was more to like kind of this experience than just like, waking up, working one guy was making more money than I have ever made. And and doing it again, right? Year by year. How big was my bonus? And those things don't drive me. I really wanted to make sure that, I was using my skill set in a productive way. And, this is the time when Obama's in office. And I don't know, it's hard to remember how, for most folks who weren't here during that moment, but for those of us who were, the excitement around service, around government was unparalleled. You had this really young, dynamic president who really attracted so much talent to D.C., and that's something I wanted to be a part of. And I was fortunate to, be able to enter the Obama administration working for a Morehouse alum, Jay Johnson. And then I, once there, you do well, you kind of move around, and I was able to go to White House counsel's office and then transition over to work for Secretary Fox as well. So, you have these experiences and it just feels so great. You feel like you're in the middle of the world, the policy world, because you can't go to work if the budget's not passed, or you're thinking about, how does this particular, policy affect, folks on the ground. So, that was how I transitioned, and that's what I thought about, like, going to government. I was like, you know what? I wanted to leave the firm. I knew I didn't want to be a partner, but I wanted to squeeze as much out of the experience as possible, and the timing was right. And then once, unfortunately, Donald Trump became president, I like to say it was my wife's turn to chase her career and her dreams, which brought us to L.A. And every day I'm really thankful that I came to L.A.
Yeah, LA is it can be a great place. Obviously, it has its downsides.
Yeah.
Okay, so after kind of going through this journey, working for government, you get this idea to sort of help other kids have similar experiences, and tell me about the origin of
no. So Black Collar Success really is the encapsulation of an idea. Going back to what I, mentioned before about an organization that is doing the work and standing the gap, filling those gaps that I wish were kind of filled when I was coming up, and doing it with intentionality, right? So, I like to say we're all about empowerment through academic opportunity. To and through program that's all about getting Black kids from LA, California, eventually across the country, once we get going, into college. That's the first part of it. We have a really dedicated team of academic advisors who are good at what they do. They recruit a student, they find them, they kind of do an assessment, and then we work through the schools they want to go to, work on applications, and then get them all opportunities that they hope and desire, as many as we can. Then we sit down and we look back and we're like, all right, so what's the best fit? Once that decision is made, we transition over to our success team, a team of success managers. And their whole goal is to make sure that our students are successful in and out of college. I like to say, going to college is great. It's an achievement. You should definitely anybody should be a proud of it. But graduating is I think is an even better achievement. And what's an even better achievement after that? Getting a job and a career of your choice, right? So ultimately, going to college is about achieving a measure of economic security for yourself and for your family. So we take that to heart and we work with our students to make sure that they are tracking toward those careers that they want to enter. And then not only that, that they are successful on campus. That takes the effect of doing a lot of different things. How do you save 100? We have over 320 students across 60 different colleges and universities. And how do you support 320 students? 320 different game plans, because each student is different and they require a certain level of support in different ways. You have some who are just, I'll call you when I need help. You have those who really need kind of day-by-day support and guidance, because this is a really lonely journey for a lot of our students. They are the first in their family to go to college, which in turn, a lot of times mean the first in their family to leave the state to go to school. So it might as well be a mission to Mars for some of them, right? How do you learn the social mores of a new environment, right? Like, how do you make new friends? How do you find community in a place as far away as Vermont? If you are a kid from South LA, good chance you didn't grow up skiing. Good chance you don't understand winter sports. Good chance you just don't even understand kind of the rhythms of the seasons. Where the fall people are out, winter people are in, and if people are in, I'm not meeting people, and then that energy and excitement that comes with the spring again. So it's just a different environment altogether. Now layer on top of that increased academic rigor, being away from your family, and ultimately having to problem solve around some really unique challenges that you face on campus and off campus, because many times a lot of our students have been kind of the the stars and the foundations for their family. So we work with them and we make sure that we can help them solve for challenges, not solve for challenges for them, but help them make the right choice and help them feel empowered and engage. So we do that, but in doing that, there's a middle part that's often forgotten. If I got an A in a class, and I read 8 chapters of a 10-chapter book, and it was great on the curve. Yeah, I got the A, but there's those 2 chapters that I'm still responsible for when I show up on campus. Well, that delta was playing a significant impact on our students, because even though they got the A, those 2 chapters was impacting their persistence. So what we did was create this really innovative STEAM program where we bring the students on campus for 2 weeks, and they are taught and they are tutored in math and science. And then we reinforce the math and science tutoring with work learning labs that helps the folks to make it real, make it tangible, and help them kind of internalize kind of the lessons. And then finally, we help to introduce them to STEAM pathways. That means going to the Disney Imagination campus to learn about engineering and kind of how that works. Going to Caltech, working with Apple, doing podcasting. Going to Deloitte to understand the world of consulting. That point being that consulting touches every single industry. And I didn't know what a consultant was until I had to hire a consultant. And then you realize, oh my God, you guys don't know what you're talking about. You got smart, and then you came to present to us kind of what you think we should be doing. But you're just capable. Why not kind of have that as an opportunity for, young people who are talented and are multifaceted, but they just don't know it exists. So we're focused on, increasing the readiness of our students in between that summer when they graduate high school and go to college, and then so on and so forth, so that, when they show up on campus, they're not able just to succeed, but exceed expectations. So, when we talk about Black college success, that's what Black college success is. It's an idea brought to life with some amazing and generous supporters who are really invested in the civic development and growth of Los Angeles, the Black community, and all communities, quite frankly, that I'm enormously grateful to have as part of this journey.
Nice. So started here in LA, the focus is on South LA, but it sounds like the mission is to go nationwide with it, right?
Absolutely. So we see it as this. If I'm a university, my priorities are, all right, how do I do the greatest amount of good for the most amount of students, right? And that generally means that I'm looking at graphs and like, all right, how do we make sure we have dorms here, blah, 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 and all that stuff. What we find is at the margins is, this the African American population isn't statistically significant enough that kind of leads a lot of decisions to be made basically for them, right? So I say to the universities, like, listen, we're working with these students. We know them really well. We know their families. We know the challenges that they face. And I can tell you, to a point, kind of what to expect with these challenges. We'll partner with you. We'll basically become the consultant, tell you what the issue is, and then solve for that issue. All we just want is partnerships. We want you to be able to kind of take an interest and take a specific specific partnership with us that allots certain services and that kind of really kind of gives intentionality and attention, to be quite honest, to our students. The university has been really, really, really receptive because our ultimate goal is to create this playbook. Go to the university and say, hey, you do X, Y, Z. You can increase your persistence among Black and brown minorities at your universities. And we know. You know why we know? Because we have the data. We've A/B tested across different universities. We have so many different students coming in from different spectrum of the socioeconomic ladder, and we can tell you kind of what to expect and when to expect it and how you should respond, and use that playbook to increase the persistence rates across universities and cities and states across the country. So that's the goal. The goal is to kind of use this as an opportunity to create national change. That's our goal, is to kind of take what's happening here in Los Angeles and to help that solve for our national challenges.
Yeah, and you mentioned this phrase a couple times, the persistency.
Yeah.
How big of a problem is that?
Well, that's the ball game. So you look at the data, right? At LAUSD, 85% of the students who Black students, most recent data we have, will graduate. 85% who graduate will not go into college. So 15% would go to a 4-year college or university. Wow. And of that 15%, you can expect, I believe it's something to the effect of less than 85% will graduate again. So you just kind of slicing and dicing, and then you have like this incredible number of folks who don't finish. So, what we know in this economy is college is incredibly expensive. I remember when I went to school, and I know, sorry, I'm dating myself here. I remember thinking that, oh my God, grad school is, I think it was $40,000 a year. This is so much money. I looked at a tuition kind of bill for a private college university on the East Coast, and I won't reveal a name. $85,000
for a first year.
Yeah, for undergrad. And this was for me. I was thinking about grad school being expensive. So the cost of education is going up so high, and that's out of the reach for a lot of our students. So for those who do go, you're talking about loans, grants, a full mosaic of funding so that they can attend. But if you don't finish, the ROI on that investment immediately goes to zero. So how do we make sure that one, folks are getting a return on their investment from an opportunity perspective, and then two, even though I think a well-founded argument is that you don't need a college degree. That works if you have networks and systems in place over years who can support you on your dreams, not just financially, but relationships, introductions, and everything that takes to kind of enter a career or field. So you have students and families missing out on opportunities and access to networks that come with having a roommate whose family, does well and lives on the East Coast or from Houston, et cetera. You just lose out on those networks. And then finally, it's the credentialing aspect of it, right? And we're fortunate to be in a new economy where, talent will make a way, right? Well, while talent will make a way, not all talent will be seen. And I think the credential element of school allows folks to kind of, one, work their way toward professionalism and kind of make missteps along the way without them being detrimental to kind of the impact of their life and career. But two, it's a formalized process of helping folks into our workforce, right? So I think the challenge with, the lack of persistence is that it it really kind of keeps our young people, our students, Black students I'm speaking about specifically, from having a chance to kind of access the full benefit of American opportunity.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And you can't underestimate the extent to which American and all corporations, not
Yeah.
just American, corporations are using these schools and the credentialing that you just mentioned as a major filter, is maybe the only filter.
Yeah.
Like they're basically outsourcing. I heard, I think it was Mark Andreessen on a podcast.
Yeah.
He was like, corporations have outsourced their qualification interview process
Yeah.
to these universities.
Yeah.
And so if kids aren't graduating, it's over for them, essentially.
Yeah, I know. I remember talking to someone and they said something that was just so offhand but so incisive. Like, oh, you're going to grad school to use their recruiting department. And I was like, oh, I never thought about that.
Yeah.
Like, because ultimately employers are looking for talent, and they're just trying to short circuit for the easiest and quickest way to kind of find, I guess, quote unquote, great people.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's hard. Like even like for like what we both did, which was
Yeah.
law, it's hard for in an interview process
Yeah.
to determine whether somebody can survive the rigors of a corporate law job.
Yeah.
But if they happen to have gone to University of Michigan or something,
Yeah.
you kind of know.
Yeah.
That's what these law firms are doing. They're saying, okay, well, the person got in and then graduated and had decent grades. Like they have all this data now.
Yeah.
I love the premise of Black College Success because I feel like that sort of resources in the middle
Yeah.
is an underserved, an underappreciated factor in the whole thing. Because I happen to have great parents who were education focused and understood and sort of taught me, I was a self-motivated person, but had I not been and had I not, done the extra 2 chapters, they would have been telling me to do it. And I feel like many kids, especially first generation college kids or foster kids, they've got no one to talk to.
Yeah.
No one to show them how to do study skills and why it's important to have these kind of motivations. And it makes a huge difference in the end outcome.
Yeah.
It's one thing to do really well and get in and pass the standardized test and get in. But you got to actually graduate and have good grades, like really good grades if you want to get the top jobs.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Or, I mean, at this point, even if you don't want to get the top jobs, you still have to have great credentials because it's a global economy now. And the way labor is being allocated, a job that's done over the computer can be done in India as well as it can be done in Ukraine as well as it can be done in Europe as well as it can be done in California. So it's really making sure that, our young people are prepared to kind of compete in the global economy.
Which is getting harder and harder because tech that is coming out like every day, seemingly. It's going to be hard for these kids. I worry about our kids. The world that they're going to enter is going to be incredibly competitive.
Yeah. I like to think that, AI won't displace us. What it will displace is the people who don't know how to use AI.
Yeah.
And you want to make sure that, folks are trained in those skill sets or just thinking differently in a way that incorporates that.
Yeah, that's right. So where are you at right now with Black College Success? So I think you mentioned you had over 300 students in 60 universities. Yeah.
So, I'll just take a step back I would be remiss if I didn't explain our model a little bit more. So what we do is we partner on 2 sides of the equation. I call it the and both approach. We partner with high schools in Los Angeles, and we have these really talented counselors who go into the schools and work with the students during school time, during like a planning period, so to speak, and recruit them and kind of work on applications. And then once we get them into school, as I said, we have a whole team of success counselors who case manage work with them, just kind of mentor near peer resource navigate. It's the full spectrum, right? So we are currently in 11 schools across Los Angeles. We just actually entered Inglewood to provide services there. And we use a cohort model. Initially, we said, if we can get 150 kids a year, which, some folks are like, oh, that's a lot, and support them and take them through, that would be great. Well, we realized, we could be doing more and we should be doing more. So we increased our cohort model to 200 a year. And we are recruiting 200 a year. We have 200 kids currently in our program. and they'll be coming on again. They'll be coming and adding to our more than 320 who are currently in college at more than 60 different colleges and universities across the country. So, I like to think that around May, come graduation, we'll have, more than 500 students at more universities that we actively support. And we follow them through the graduation. So every year we give them a scholarship. We give them when they enter our program, we give them a laptop. And every year we're checking in. When they're a sophomore and they come home, we're like, all right, so where's your internship? Working with them on getting situated at a different company that they want to be a part of, working with them on kind of tutoring and kind of if there's any remedial work that needs to happen, we kind of think through. And to be quite honest, bring a lot of them back for our STEAM Academy to kind of serve as like peer mentors, but also reinforce any challenges that they may have with the math and science. So all that to say, where are we at Black College Success? We're building a really strong foundation. We have some incredible, funders. I can't say enough for the level of support and intention we have behind what we're trying to do. We are expanding staff-wise. When we turned on the lights, we were a team of 4. Now we're a team of, I believe, 13, going on 14 in, about 2 years, which is significant, from a scale-up perspective. And we're making partnerships with universities across the country. We've done some great work with the Cal State system, really digging into the HBCUs, where a lot of our kids go to, and slowly making our way through the privates. We're focused on where we have scale at schools. So if I have about 30 students at your college or university, you should know us, and we should know you, and we should be able to call each other if we see something or, we need some type of help on both sides. So we are in a growth mode, and we're trying new things with a focus on innovation and outcomes. All we care about are outcomes. Our outcomes are our students graduating, persisting, and are they entering the high demand fields of their choice. Anything short of that to us, is not a priority. So we do all the things to make sure that, we have success with students. And it isn't about, and I mean success broadly defined. It isn't about just grades or high level internships. We're about creating good people, creating leaders, creating someone who understands who's mentally well, but still going through the process. So we're in a growth phase, but I think I'm biased, obviously, but we're doing incredible work.
That's exciting, man. I mean, look, if you add in 200 a year, you're going to be in the thousands before you know it.
Yeah.
You mentioned something a minute ago that a term I never or an acronym maybe, HBCU. Yeah. What is that?
Yeah.
Just so
HBCUs is historically Black colleges and universities. It's the collection of universities specifically founded and educates Black students. Morehouse College would be HBCU. My wife went to Spelman, and they're right across the street. Howard is where Vice President Kamala Harris went, and in Hampton there's like a full.
Got it.
There's like kind of a full community of them, about 100, more than 100 or so.
Okay.
There aren't many, for obvious reasons, there aren't many on the West Coast because just the way the country was founded, they're founded where they're predominantly slaves. There is one here, Charles Drew University, which I believe is a med school, but most of them are in Texas, Louisiana, Atlanta.
They're in the South, right?
In the South, below the Mason-Dixon.
Yeah,
they're few in Ohio.
When segregation was were they founded in the segregation era, basically?
Post-slavery. So in the 1800s.
Okay.
And a lot of them actually are founded in kind of small schools, founded in schoolhouses that grew to these really dynamic universities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What's cool about your mission is everyone talks about DEI and equity and stuff like that, but this is actually a legitimate pathway to equity.
Yeah.
Because when we're talking about equity, what are we talking about? We're talking about economic opportunity, right? So
absolutely.
Our system is structured so that to get opportunity, you need to graduate from elite colleges and get these jobs. And so there's a very direct sort of payoff, right?
Yeah.
If you take a kid who has no chance and then they actually get in and then they actually graduate. Like that's a very measurable
Yeah.
kind of outcome. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good question. I think we're at a unique point in kind of our nation's living history, right? So what I mean by that is elite schools, elite jobs. I don't think there's any is a mistake or a kind of accident that 9 of our Supreme Court justices came from elite colleges, and probably of that 9, I'm just off the top of my head, maybe 6 or 7 came from Harvard or Yale. So we talk about pathways, and there's a reason why kind of those schools are feeder schools, because people who come from those experiences, want keep that pathway open, right, and kind of identify those people as, oh no, they're capable of the job. I'm a big believer. I want to kind of take a step back and kind of say it doesn't need to be about elite schools. Talent is talent, and use all the schools as like kind of a feeder ground for kind of leadership and kind of opportunity. So we work. I like to say we work with all students. It isn't just kind of the the 3.99 GPAs
Okay.
and like soon to be Rhodes Scholars or Marshall Scholars. It's also the folks who I consider myself a part of, the cohort of C students who have A potential. And you just got to charge them up, and you just got to kind of focus their energies in a way that allows them to really kind of like activate kind of what's inside of them. A lot of times it's just like kind of taking someone and focusing them. Which kind of going back to the DEI part, the conversation around, qualifications is ridiculous. It's really a conversation around opportunity, and I think there's a hysteria generally around access to opportunity because it's a global economy now, right? And folks are really just kind of anxious around like who gets the bite at the apple. Full stop. We all know, just the data alone, that diversity is good for corporations. It's good for America. To be quite honest, it's our comparative advantage, right? It's the reason why we're able to innovate. It's the reason why we're able to kind of really kind of be a cultural leader on so many fronts. It's the reason why I think we have so much generosity and we talk about geopolitics, right? Because we have communities of people from all over the world who are here and who have relationships back and forth with the outside world, on top of just us being a plurality as a nation. So with the case for diversity being kind of stone cold made, I think that we have to double down, and we have to really make sure that we're keeping those pathways open for everyone. I know there's a movement right now that has a chilling effect on diversity initiatives across the landscape. So that's corporate. Folks are really, DEI is almost like kind of a 4-letter word these days.
Yeah, it went from like really hot to just recently. Really, it feels like the last like six months or something. It's changed.
It's to the point where you kind of have like folks trying to do the same thing but masking it under a different banner, which itself is a failure, right? Because if you don't name the problem and you talk around the problem, you don't solve the problem. So I say corporations, it's always in your best interest to be diverse and support kind of that pipeline of diverse students, because just the data shows just better outcomes. Second, too, I like to say that you're only going to be able to have like kind of a diverse offering of products, of policies, of everything that comes with having kind of a diverse team by having diverse minds and diverse perspectives at the table. So with the coming, shifting in the landscape that's as a result of the affirmative action ruling, I see our leaders, and of which we all can be and play a part, of needing to be bold and needing to be committed. Committed to kind of the concept of, what it means to, foster the American dream and who has access to it. Because, it's in everyone's best interest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that the legal landscape on that has changed sort of dramatically. I mean, here in California, if I remember right, that sort of system that was ruled to be unconstitutional has been outlawed for quite some time here with really negative impacts, right?
Yeah.
Like the California schools were sort of leading on diversity. And then once they got rid of the affirmative action stuff, the numbers have got really bad, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're talking about like, was the Prop 209, had an immediate and incredible impact on minority enrollment, Black enrollment, Brown enrollment. I would say there's a reason why California, the UC system, has always been the class of the university systems, right? You look at people always, you just know about the UC system, and that wasn't by accident. I genuinely believe it was because it was educating the masses. It was really kind of giving full scale opportunity to all Californians. And with a change in Prop 209, I think that's like kind of a vicious blow to kind of who has access to this landscape of opportunity, which itself, if we look at the data, will reverberate across the country. So I think our mission is to do two things. One, to make sure that we keeping those pathways open, and we making sure that universities, private and public, now that's who are all are susceptible to this ruling, are still being bold, aren't just seeking safe harbor, based on what they think might happen as opposed to kind of what actually is happening. And then two, organizations like mine, which is further upstream in providing supports and preparing our students, so that when they get to campus or when they apply to school, they can be competitive. They can be seen, their full experience be seen, and why they deserve a slot, a seat, and how they will contribute to that student body and in turn change the world. So, with the coming change of, not the coming change, but the landscape, I think it's incumbent on like leaders in the education and the political business, to be quite frank, landscape, to be committed, to be together and kind of thinking of one mind of how are we producing the best and the brightest for our city, for our state, and for our country. Because that's what it really comes down to.
It does, yeah. And just by like, there's a sense in which the affirmative action is a blunt tool.
Yeah.
And I sort of understand the criticism of it from that perspective. But the problem with just getting rid of it is that it ignores another truth, which you guys work on every day, which is that if we're going to gate kids based on their academic performance in high school and on a standardized test, then we have to make sure that everyone has the same opportunity in their formative years. And we know for sure, that the schools, like they do all these ratings of these schools. People are not getting the same opportunities. And so there's this like fundamental problem of measuring. Because how do you measure it? There's no way to sort of level the playing field of the measurement, because these schools, in South LA, they're not as good as the schools in other parts of the neighborhood of the city. And so you've got this like systemic issue that's not getting resolved by anything now.
No, I agree with you. I think the point is the uneven nature of education across the country, education, within the city itself, right, and just of opportunity. And if we're saying that this is the bar, everyone needs to jump over that bar. Some people have to jump from a little lower to go higher, and that takes a lot more energy, takes a lot more resources and support. So the question is, how do we make sure that we are admitting the right folks to these institutions? I say that that's why understanding so much of our young people's stories matter. Because we know that, one, I think it's insane to say, hey, I know you could just pick somebody out the crowd and say, oh, you're going to be amazing in 30 years as an 18-year-old. No one knows what the world holds for like somebody at 18, whatever. You have like kind of, breadcrumbs. But for the most part, it really boils down to like really kind of trying to grant as many folks as possible as opportunity, so that you can make sure that you aren't missing folks. Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
I feel like in the world we live in, the equity piece of this conversation,
Yeah.
like there's a couple ways to deal with it, right? You could give everybody money, but nobody wants to do that.
Yeah.
So the reparations conversation, for example, is good. It doesn't outside of like San Francisco, it doesn't really go anywhere.
Yeah.
So where does that leave you, right? You got education. It's the only chance, but we're not being honest with ourselves about the inequalities and the systemic sort of economically segregated inequalities. Like I work, just to bring another issue up, which you probably run into a lot at Black College Success, is digital equity.
Yeah.
I'm doing some civic activist work with a group called the Angelino Project, and one of our teams is focused on that. And the data on this digital equity is morally outrageous.
Yeah.
Like these internet service providers don't offer like cheap internet in South LA, and like there's politics about what the easements are granted for these ISPs. It's wild. It's the Wild West, and like the press is sort of covering it.
Yeah.
And you mentioned it sort of earlier when you talked about how you give the kids a laptop.
Yeah.
In a lot of parts of town, kids have a laptop and 2 iPads and a phone, right? But in South LA, you might not have anything, and you might not even have internet.
Yeah.
And in this day and age, how could a kid compete when the kids up in Harvard Westlake are using ChatGPT?
Yeah.
How's a kid in South LA is going to compete with that? They don't have a computer.
I know. I think that's the ball game, right? Is a recognition of just like, all right, like if we're asking our folks to compete, let's make sure everyone has the even playing field to compete on. Or if the playing field is not even, let's raise kind of the field a little bit in this area so that it isn't sloped, right? I think about like I was talking to a friend the other day, and we just randomly were reminiscing about like the SAT, and he couldn't believe that I just took it cold. And my story, I'm lucky that I actually knew what I was doing, but in terms of like the substance of the work, but taking a SAT is literally all about strategy. Like kind of, so it is. So, think about folks who don't have that insight, or just kind of waking up and going to take the SAT. Whereas I know for a fact how folks prepare. They start preparing from literally when they're freshmen in high school,
for sure,
so that they can get a quality score. And fortunately, that experience translated to law school for me, where I knew I can't take this code, can't take the LSAT code, and I recognized it's all strategy. It's all like kind of strategy, and because there's not much substance around that. So just reverse engineering it back to kind of the landscape and making sure that we have more equity. I think it starts with conversations like this. I think it starts with an understanding that the world isn't fair and is unequal. How you're not going to solve every problem, but when it comes to education, how do we make sure that the playing field is level and opportunity is available to everyone, everyone who wants it, right? Because I do believe not everything's for everyone. But in those situations, there's a hunger, a thirst for knowledge, for doing that thing. How do we make sure that folks can do that thing?
Yeah. And education, and man, I agree. Education is like the best chance we got. There's nothing else that comes even close to it. I think I'm biased for obvious reasons, but I think it's one of the best investments because it's a human endeavor, but it's also around pouring into kind of the future. Yeah.
Only other investments that we make like that are just large infrastructure projects, right?
Yeah, you build Robert Moses style, right? Build another bridge.
like building bridges and basically, like investing in cities, not for, of which we probably won't see the shade of, the trees we won't see the shade of, but we know that, in the future, our young people, our kids, our families will benefit from it. Yeah. And that's what education is.
It is, yeah. The test prep thing is so funny, man. Like in the sort of elite schools in America, it is an industry. People are highly compensated, tutors, like hundreds of dollars an hour for tutors. And the fact that like a whole bunch of American kids are going in cold. Like, you probably didn't even know the test. They're like, it was scheduled by your school probably. They're like,
Literally.
your SAT's on Saturday.
Literally. And you know, and I give it, one of the things I love about my mom is that I call her like kind of the OG hippie in terms of like it all work itself out. She would always like kind of, which is not great for high-strung kids, right? You're like, I need an answer. She's like, nah, just let it, you know, it'll work itself out. And it wasn't that she wasn't cognizant of that stuff. It's just that, you know, she just had a lot going on. And I think generally, you know, I have 6 other brothers and sisters. 6 other brothers and sisters. And that means that there's 7 of us in total. You know, you put so much time in the day for that many, you know, kids. And I appreciate her so much now from just like instilling a sense of you can do it. You know, you control, you're the master of your own fate and destiny. But, you know, the flip side is, man, it could have gone wrong. And, you know, one of those things was, you know, showing up cold.
Yeah, for sure.
As I see. And, you know, but to your larger point around like kind of the industry around it, New York Magazine just had this really fascinating like kind of cover story about like kind of the, you know, the education, like kind of test prep industry. You know, you got people, you know, making hundreds of thousands of dollars advising kids on, you know, what to say, what to write, you know, what to study, what clubs to do early on, so that, you know, when their file shows up on admissions officers or counselors' desks, they look like kind of the next unicorn I got a company, you know, and as opposed to the other side, which is, you know, I did these really unique and interesting things, not because I had somebody telling me, but just because this is all I could do and this is what, you know, I had to do. So, you know, I'm very aware of that. And, you know, every day we're focused on leveling that playing field.
Yeah. And the standardized test to me is kind of another area that needs to get looked at. Because I know for sure that you can get better at it. Because like I had a different experience where I took the pre-SAT and I didn't do great. And I was like top of my class, like the best grades in the whole school. And I was like, okay, what the hell just happened? I should have got a perfect score. But I practiced.
Yeah.
I did it, and then I got a great score. And so I know that it makes a differance.
Yeah,
it's obvious.
No, for sure.
Yeah.
I remember being in, when I graduated from Morehouse, I did Peace Corps. I was in Nicaragua. And I was going to, because I knew I couldn't take, you know, you hear so much, oh, you got to prepare for the LSAT. I took a LSAT class, but I wound up, I didn't really take it too seriously because I knew I was going to Peace Corps. But what I did was take all my books that I got from the class and took them with me to Nicaragua. So on like my off days, when like, you know, not off days, but like just like, it's a lot, you spend a lot of nights by yourself when you're living on, you know, in a small community of about 300 like miles and hundreds of miles away from the capital. I remember being by candlelight working on like kind of the strategy. And I got so good that I used to love the, you know, a treat was to do the logic games.
Yeah.
So by the time I, you know, was ready to come home, you know, I blew out that element of the LSAT. And I was always a great reader, so I just wasn't really concerned about that piece of it. But I knew I tremendously improved from where, you know, I started to where I ended. So I know this is really about strategy. That's what made me come to the mind. I know this is all strategy. It's not basically, you know, substance.
It's not. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, the logic games were always the wild card because if you mess one up, it could mess your whole score up.
Literally.
You got it. And it's like, some of them are tricky. And even if you're like really smart, you could mess one up just because you didn't understand like the sort of game that was being played.
Yeah. Like you were answering the question and it's a time thing too. So you have the anxiety of like, all right, am I taking too much time on this? And like, then it starts to get in. So it becomes like a feedback loop. But, you know, to that point, you can't tell me that's like indicative of like who's going to be a star. Yeah. Or not even a star, who's going to be just borderline successful.
That's right. It's ridiculous. Yeah. Well, you brought up Nicaragua. I was going to ask you about that. Tell me, what were you doing in the Peace Corps?
Yeah, no. So going back to like, you know, I know we started off talking about, you know, growing up in inner city during Giuliani era. You know, one of the things that I wanted to was always experience something entirely different than what I kind of knew. And I remember graduating, and I remember, you know, everyone's going off to like kind of consulting, you know, gigs on Wall Street, and, you know, kind of entering their careers, going to grad school, going to med school. You know, I knew I didn't want to, you know, do any of that, and I was really looking for adventure meets test, something that would test my fortitude. as well as like capacity build, skill build, and like learn how to be a leader. And the Peace Corps came a calling. They have some of the most dynamic ads. You ever see those like kind of posters where like it really kind of is just a question. Like, what are you waiting for? And they have like kind of like this young person or working in like this remote village with like kind of tattered clothes. It kind of speaks to, a certain like kind of pathos, right?
Mm-hmm.
Really ethos. Well, it spoke to me. And I applied and I wanted to go someplace as far away as possible. So I was thinking I'd go to like kind of like Mali or something. I'd be riding on like a dirt bike across the desert. Not the case. I wound up going to Nicaragua, which was in Central America, and not as far as I wanted to go, but I think probably as far as I needed to be. It was a really, really great time. You come in with other volunteers, a cohort of volunteers, and you spend about 3 months learning the language. Fortunately, it was Spanish, and everyone generally has a good baseline if you went to American school or of some sort. So spend 3 months learning Spanish, but I can tell you right now, that's not enough Spanish to kind of be working and living, whatever. So after 3 months, you go to your site. I was a health volunteer. So, I didn't have a background in health, but, they kind of give you like different projects to run. So what I did, I would put a lot of spin on a lot of different like kind of the projects. I remember I went to a small community outside of in Rio San Juan called Las Palomas. About 300 or so people, farming community. And I remember living in a wood house on the side of the hill. It's like kind of with a little, obviously no running water.
No running water, wow.
It was, we would take bucket baths, and my kitchen was like kind of next door, and it was like a little propane tank or whatever. And all this stuff sounds like so insane to me right now, but I remember just being like kind of, it's just fun. Like I read a lot, I drank a lot of coffee with the community. We, put together little sports leagues. I created I created a community bank around microfinance. I worked with the farmers on like soy production. Worked in the schools with around infant and maternal health. Did a lot of different things, but just really just integrated in the community immediately. So myself as just a community member would go to the different meetings, would just do things like the fiestas, the quinceañeras, and all this in Spanish. And all this entirely different than like, I'm a city kid. I don't know like how to fish. I don't know any of this stuff, but like you just got to pick it up quickly. We wake up at 4 a.m. To go to the farm to help milk the cows. Just because that's the way you connect with folks. You like, working with them, doing the things that they're doing. Then you come home for lunch, you eat, you play the rice and beans in the tortilla. Then you go back out and wrap things up, and then you're done for the day. You're just hanging around like in the heat in rubber boots and cut off shorts. I don't think I wore a shirt for about 2 years.
Just because it's so hot.
It's just like literally, it's just like kind of like you just walk, you like literally just become like kind of one of the people. It's like hot and you're just like out and about and you just are just in the community. So that was like a really interesting experience because it forced me to kind of go outside of every single comfort zone that I had. You don't speak English. You legitimately don't speak English, for like months at a time because you're in a small community. So till this day, some of my favorite television shows are the Spanish shows that I used to watch with the different families, the telenovelas and the game shows, Don Francisco. So like so going back to it, like that's actually why I did it. I did it for a sense of adventure, but also, a chance to really like kind of start like kind of my public service journey.
Yeah, to like lean in. It's obviously like you had that because you were young at the time that you made that decision.
Yeah, I mean, in hindsight, 21. 21. Imagine the whole concept it's really interesting to me because you're 21. Federal government sends you to another country and drops you on a small community and says, all right, call us when you're sick, run your programs. Run some programs and kind of make change, quantifiable change. And yeah, you got to learn how to, build support within the community. You got to identify the leaders. You got to, one, add value. And two, you got to learn to listen. I think that too much of leadership, people think leadership is leading, but every good leader has to know when to be a follower. And I learned tremendously that you have to listen way more than you talk in those environments. And just to be open and just to have fun. Because, I mean, that's really what's going to kind of create the connections that you need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It sounds like it's like a truly entrepreneurial enviurement, right? You're just on your own. You're on your own in a foreign country. And,
yeah. You're on your own. And you got to remember, too, this is pre-internet. This isn't social media.
Pre-smartphone.
Yeah, pre-smartphone.
Yeah.
Like, I remember I was so far away from, like, kind of, like, communications. They gave me the satellite phone. It was the most enormous thing. And it was because if I was like if they needed to evacuate me,
I see,
or I need to be evacuated, I would walk maybe like a mile to like this big hill, stand on top of the hill, and then hold the phone up and make a phone call, or whatever. Like we had this big hurricane, I had to call like, hey, am I supposed to go to the Capitol? It was like insane. Now, you have like kind of internet wherever you go. Like it was such a treat. There's a whole 2.5 years of pop culture that I have no concept of. Like, what was the song of the year? Who won the NBA Finals? But I can tell you who won the World Cup that year because that was like...
that was the focus.
Yeah, that was the focus.
I got it, yeah.
Yeah.
What an experience. What do you think, like, in your upbringing led you to be someone open to making that decision at 21?
Yeah, I attributed it 1,000% to my family, specifically my mother. I'm one of these people that's fortunate to come from a great family. It's matrilineal. My grandmother, Hattie White, is, the person we have just so much reverence and respect for. And, her children, my aunts and my uncles, were a tight unit. So one of the things that they always did, they always supported you. No matter what your dreams were, they would support you, everyone in my family. And my mom specifically she's the type of person, she won't ever tell you no. She'll say, all right, so that's what you want to do. Sounds cool. How you think you should go about it? And she would just always facilitate like kind of dreaming and like execution. So that's why every single person in my family my immediate family is kind of successful as they define. And, I have an older sister who is a poet. I don't know how one makes... you just not a career that you want your kid to go into, right? You're like, how do you make money from poetry? Well, she's one of these people that I think will win a Genius Grant. She's a professor at Colby College, and she made a career out of poetry.
Yeah.
Tenured professor at a great university. Another brother who's an entrepreneur, and just a great person and all around. A younger sister who is like kind of the definition of cool. Like, she's a videographer, but also, like, she lives out here in L.A., and, like, every time, like, my wife and I have, like, a question about, like, kind of what's happening, we ask her, but also, her skill set is, like, out of this world. She, she's been a part of some really big films and just has a great eye for videography and cinematography and so on and so forth. So, like, I think a lot of that just comes from, as my wife would say, fostering an environment of executive function. And that's what my mom did.
Yeah. It sounds like quite an upbringing, and like it's that unconditional support.
Yeah.
Like, okay, you want to do that? You want to go to the moon or whatever it is. Yeah. That's amazing.
The only thing she ever said not to do was, hey, don't ride a motorcycle. And to this day, I've never ridden a motorcycle. Which
is actually smart, yeah. That's really good advice, yeah. Don't ride a motorcycle. Don't do fentanyl.
Don't jump out of an airplane.
Man, such a great story. Well, this has been a fun conversation. I have a couple questions, couple more questions to round it out.
Yeah.
And they might seem disjointed, but I want to I got to ask you since you're here. Another thing you and I have talked about time and time again is crisis in civic engagement in sort of our generation, but also other generations too. And I don't really know if there's a question there, but like, what do you think the cause of that is, and how do we go about getting more and more people, especially people with executive function, how do we get more and more people interested in playing in in the world of public service or crossing over into government or whatever we need them to do to make our country better?
Yeah, I think it's like kind of I think it's multiple things happening at once, right? We're at a unique space. Technology, while it's made us a lot closer, has also, I think, divided us in ways that we've not seen before. We're all served up content that kind of we agree with, and the stuff that we don't agree with, get it out our way. And that in turn, I think, balkanizes us. Kind of just makes us more disconnected. And as a result, the problems that we face start to become more intractable, right? Because if I'm not talking to you, or to be quite honest, if, I see the other side and, I'm seeing it as being a situation where it's so obvious the solution, why can't you get on board? And likewise, they feel the same way. There's no way we're going to kind of have a compromise, right? So, I think it's kind of one, really getting to know people, really getting to know each other in a way that's real. But the big picture is it's expensive in all these major cities where folks live. I find it to be a really expensive experience, and folks are busy trying to you got a living.
Right. So it's like the survival aspect of economic life is causing so much stress for people that they can't engage in civic activism.
They focus on themselves.
Yeah.
Like I like to say, how can I save the world if I'm worried about what I'm going to eat for dinner, right?
Yeah.
Or if I'm going to have anything to eat for dinner. That's one end of the spectrum. For the folks who've been hyper successful, and do have kind of the wealth and the bandwidth to engage more. I say that there has to be an increased responsibility of I've gotten so much from this country, I've gotten so much from these communities. How can I pour back and give back? And I do see that being an ethos that's changed from what it used to be. I think it has a lot to do with a correlation of how we engage government. The tax rate in the 60s was, top end, you're talking about 90% when you on capital gains, whatever, right? Now it's about as low as I think 20%. And it's a focus on how do I keep more? How do I keep more for me? And as opposed to, if I do give more, these are the knock-on benefits that will, benefit not only me but a larger community. And to be quite honest, benefits that I been able to build and innovate on top of, right? So, I think a lot of it has to do with an increased responsibility, collective action around kind of these issues, and getting to really kind of know each other. It feels kind of ridiculous to say, but the more you know people, the less you can demonize them. The less they feel a more sense of other, and the more you realize that we're all kind of in this together. I'm trying to get my kids at school on time just as you are. I'm trying to, eke out more time in the day and to kind of, be with my wife and be with my family just as you are. So, we all want the same things. It's a question of, coming together to kind of make sure that we all have those things.
Yeah, man, I agree. I feel like you raise an interesting point about the economic security question, though. And it's a broader question, just thinking out loud for the democracy. How could you have a participatory republic if so many Americans are living on the edge? That's an interesting question because the answer is not obvious, right? People, make fun of Americans because they can't name the branches of government. There's all these things like that. But if you're living on the edge of life at all times, when do you have time to read? When do you have time to look up the candidates or go meet the candidates? People like you and I are sort of privileged in the sense that we could do that.
Yeah.
But that's not true for all Americans.
Absolutely. And it's not true for, I would say, the vast majority, especially when you think about just how much it takes just to kind of be at par. And it's changing from our parents' generation and their parents' generation to now, and it's changing from our generation to, generation Gen Z and Generation Alpha. It's slowly we're slowly, it's changing, but what our system isn't. Our expectations, are changing, but the system is still kind of staying the same.
Yeah.
And it has to kind of be updated.
Yeah. And just to take it full circle to college, like
Yeah.
the price of college, like back to the par, right?
Yeah.
The price of college is up huge, but the starting salary is not even close.
It's and you start to, which kind of these really interesting conversations, right? That you're forced to have, like, all right, you have to go to college. If I'm a young person and I say, why should I go to college? And I give you all the benefits, but it's also a part about it is going to college on faith at the end of this journey that the system that exists, as we know, will be there and reward you for kind of your hard efforts, etc. And I'm hopeful that with more intentionality around our democratic system, around kind of the business world, that system will evolve to, one, kind of meet the students that are coming out, but also on the other side, universities will need to be cheaper. Universities will need to be able to demonstrate their value add, and not in the terms of the things and accoutrements that they offer, but the capability and skills and opportunity that they're offering.
Yeah. Like they got to level up and make sure these kids are ready.
And to be quite honest, I think they're offering the wrong things.
Yeah.
Like you shouldn't. University tuition costs $80,000 a year, insane amount of money. A mortgage back in the 70s, basically, for a nice home. So in that $80,000, how much of that is necessary, right? Like, are we talking? Are this basically kind of new buildings that we don't really need, racquetball courts, things like, what are the essentials, right? Or is it you're paying into like you have a really high labor cost. I don't know the answer to that, but I know that university needs to be they need to be educating more people, and they need to be doing it for cheaper.
Yeah,
like, because that rate is just unsustainable.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, last question for you. This has been a phenomenal conversation, man. I really appreciate you being so open and sharing. If our listeners were interested in helping out the mission of Black college success, what can they do?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, Nick, because, the work that we're doing is not in a vacuum, it's not in silos. I'm of the mind we're stronger together, and we are always looking for the right partners to support the work that we're doing, which in turn supports our students across the full spectrum, not just getting into college, but also being successful in college and entering the high demand pathways. So, I like to say there are, a number of ways that folks can support us. One, other organizations that are doing this work in this area, we love to hear from you guys. We would love to kind of connect and kind of see where there's overlap and where there's synergy so that we can work together. We're really thankful for the foundations that have been really, supportive of our work. But knowing that that's not that doesn't go into perpetuity. So we're always mindful of making sure that we're cultivating new relationships with foundations and those who want to be supportive of our work from a financial as well as resource perspective, right? So I always say you can easily find me on the internet. You can find the organization blackcollegesuccess.org, and to be quite honest, you can always find us in the community. That's the work that we're doing, and that's where we'll always be. Working with the families, working with the students, so that we're creating this flywheel effect that has national and ultimately global implications.
That's great, man. Well, look, really appreciate what you do for the community and your leadership and your willingness to dedicate your life to service. And happy to be your friend.
Yeah,
and appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, we're thankful. We're thankful for we're thankful for you, and we're thankful. Listen, we need more. I like to say we need more Nick Halaris. So we need more folks who, understand, that this is an ecosystem, and one side is only as great as the other. The hand that is stretched needs a hand to be outstretched on the other end too. So we're thankful and immensely for all the support you've given us.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah.